Hey guys, we're going to be doing something a little bit different for the channel today. It's going to be a review. It's going to be an X-Carve review. I know you guys are probably getting a little bit sick of those because everybody's doing X-Carve reviews right now, but bear with me because this one's going to be a little bit different. This one I'm going to be focusing almost entirely on aluminum milling on the new machine. I mean, I'm going to go through all of the, upgrades and the changes and whatnot as well. What I liked, what I didn't like. There's some stuff you can skip. There's some stuff that's really great. So make sure to pay attention for all of that stuff. But towards the end, I'm going to be talking specifically about milling aluminum, and not just milling aluminum, but specifically like turnover time. Like, could you realistically run a small business making, some small part that you invented, or maybe you're rapid prototyping, or maybe you're just trying to test market viability for something and you want to do the initial work at home without getting a lot of tooling and dies and stuff like that created. So for the milling, I'm taking the stance that I'm a inventor or something. I created this part. This is a real part, consequently. For those people out there who have, you can see it in the background there, the rigid combination spindle and edge sander. If you're more than familiar with these little nuts right here, they sit on the top of the machine and they have a tendency to get over torqued. And then what happens is, because they're over torqued on there, you end up having to grab a pair of pliers or a wrench or something, pull it off, and the rubber gets all chewed up and nasty and eventually needs to be replaced. So a while back, Steve French had created, it was a tip video, and in that video he did it was a little wrench. It was basically the same concept. It was just this inner shape. It was round on the outside and it had a handle on it, so you could use it like a wrench. I thought it was a great idea. I made one almost immediately, used it for probably 6 months or so, and then one day it dawned on me that I could just make the entire thing symmetrical and leave it on the machine all the time. So I just never take it off anymore. So the way this thing works, if it's not obvious enough, it just sits on there like that. So I thought, for the testing, I'm not really planning on selling these unless for some reason everybody wants one. But I'm just gonna mill them out of aluminum and pretend basically that I was a small Etsy shop or something. And could I realistically keep up with a decent amount of turnover with a decent edge quality and whatnot right off of the machine? So this has been put through a vibratory polisher just to give it a nice finish. So the overall process here is cut it on the machine, cut it out, knock off the tabs, throw it in the vibratory polisher, done, right? That's the whole process. I did that with the old configuration of the machine. The new configuration of the machine with the old settings, which is the default, and we'll talk about that as well because it's one of the things I kind of find annoying about easel. And then I did that after I started messing around with the settings, and I'll talk about like what kind of settings and what kind of operations I think the machine's best at. But before we get into any of that, let's actually walk through the machine, what the upgrades are, whether or not they work, and talk about the actual installation process, the customer service experience, etc. And we'll jump into it. So first and foremost, before we switch the cameras and get over to the machine, I do want to talk a little bit about the packaging. If you're at all intimidated about building something like a CNC or a 3D printer or whatever, that can be understandable because often there's a ton of parts, the instructions tend to be kind of garbage, and this is not that. Now, I have griped about the instructions in the past, and honestly, I feel that the instructions for the upgrade kit here are not even as good as the old instructions, but they're both adequate that you'll be able to get through the install with relatively no problem. So don't let that, dissuade you from actually thinking that a CNC or something like that is within the realm of possibility, especially anything from Inventables here, because I will say their packaging is beautiful. Everything that you get is individually sorted in their own bag. Each bag is individually labeled with the part number, the size, everything that you need, and that makes the whole process go really, really nicely. The instruction process for the full assembly I haven't looked at in a long time. It was a little lacking way back in the day. I suspect it's probably better now. But for the installation the upgrade installation, there are a couple of things I do want to point out, just because they did ask for a full, fair, and honest review, and that's what I'm going to give you, good and bad. The new instructions, and I understand why they're this way, but keep in mind that some of these things are sold as a kit, right? So I'm going to be reviewing. It's essentially 3 different upgrades. There's an upgrade kit which consists of a new, what they call a wide slide X-axis. I think that's what they call it. It's basically a replacement for the two thin X-axis rails that used to be sandwiched together. Now it's one big wide square piece, phenomenally better than the other one. If you do nothing else, definitely get the X-axis upgrade. That's worth right there, or that's worth your time right there. But that kit comes with that rail. It also comes with let's see, the new electronics here, which I don't know if you can see, the X controller. It comes with this sideboard right here, which is not currently attached, and we will definitely talk about that. This right here is normally mounted the other way, and it also comes with the Z probe. Now, all of those things, when you go through, there's like an installation wizard. Each one is handled as a start-to-finish upgrade for that part, meaning that, when you do the Z probe, it has zero context about the other upgrades that might be going on, even though you do handle it as a step-by-step wizard. And pardon me for sweating so much. I'm in my garage right now, and it is really hot in California, and I can't run my AC because it drowns out the noise of the mic. So, the problem with doing the step-by-step is you're going to have a lot of repetitive tasks. What's going to end up happening is, first thing that you're going to do is replace your X-axis, which is going to tell you at the end to remove the cable that goes to the far side Y stepper motor, and then refish it in through the new axis. Wonderful. The problem is the next thing you're going to do is replace your X controller, and unless you want to change the settings around so you can leave your wiring exactly the same, if you can fiddle with the electronics a little bit so you can have the exact same wiring config, and there's nothing really wrong with that. Really, the main difference there is that the old wiring basically piggybacks the two Y stepper motors, so you're basically just reversing two of the wires on the other stepper motors so that they always run in opposition to each other, basically, so it keeps both sides in parallel. On the new system, if you rerun one of the wires, you can dedicate a controller on the board, like a driver, to each individual stepper motor. So I opted to go that way because it meant leaving the electronics alone, getting us a dedicated driver for the other motor, etc. So if you do that, after tediously fishing that wire through the thing and pulling it out really carefully with tweezers on the other side and all that kind of stuff, getting everything wired up, you're going to realize you're just going to take that thing right back out again and replace it with a much longer cable that goes all the way through the drag train, through the bottom side, drag chain. Also, I'm going to try and do most of this stuff in one take, so I'm going to flub some lines here and there. This is actually the 4th time of me trying to do this review because, well, I don't even want to get into it. There were camera issues, we'll call it that. So it's a time improvement, right? Also, if you're going to be upgrading the spindle later on, like I did, I replaced it with a DeWalt 611 trim router, and they have a little upgrade kit. I don't think the upgrade kit comes with the router. I think it's just the housing, but it's just a standard off-the-shelf DeWalt 611. So, that slides in, and that works great. It's a perfectly good upgrade, but you also had an old motor cable, old spindle power cable that was dragged through the drag chain on the top. And if you're then also doing the Z probe installation, you're adding a new wire. So if you could have, added or coupled those two processes together, where you were feeding one wire in by pulling the other wire out, that would have made things a lot easier. Again, the only problem here, is really that they're being handled as a bunch of discrete operations instead of in the context of the entire upgrade kit or many upgrade kits that might happen. And all it would take is a little note or maybe a little video explaining, some of those little caveats, something like this. So, you get through all that. You install the sideboard, all that kind of stuff. It's fine. The Z probe. When you get to the Z probe, you're going to find that there's an instruction that says that some of the old models have a hole, and we'll talk about this when we move the camera and stuff over there. They have a hole in the upper section of, I guess, would be the Z carriage. And, if it has the hole, that's where you install the Z probe. If it doesn't have the hole, they give you what they call a Z Probe Relocation Kit, and that's fine, great. But the Z Probe Relocation Kit is essentially a bracket that hangs off the side. That doesn't look nearly as cool. So even if you had the hole and you installed it there, it wouldn't matter. I actually took the time then, because I didn't know it was going to interfere with the later upgrade, to put in a hole. I actually just, made my own hole there so I could have a nice looking mount right there. And then later you find out that if you're also doing the dust collection upgrade that the rails interfere with that hole anyway, and you have no choice but to use the Z Probe Relocation Kit. So it's not like these instructions are written in Latin or anything. You're going to be able to get through them just fine. My gripe really is only that because they're handled as discrete operations that are chained together, instead of having any context about the other operations that might be going on, you're going to have a lot of repetitive tasks, and things like fishing cables through the drag chain is not fun, especially here in California where it's like 106 degrees and you're in your hot garage and you're doing repetitive work. It doesn't put you in the best mood. And on the newer machines, I think when they ship, I think they come with the cooler drag chain that snaps open so you can access the wires. The older machine, and probably anybody who's doing the upgrade, they're not going to have that, which means you're ultimately going to be literally snaking wires through an already kind of crowded drag chain. So little things like that I thought could have been improved, but again, you're going to get through them. The packaging and stuff, that certainly helps. I did end up calling customer service at one point for this because, again, I wanted to do some milling on the old machine as well as the new machine, or rather the configuration of the old machine versus the new config. And since then, they've done a lot of upgrades to the drivers and the easel software, and they did not work at all with my old my old electronics. They just didn't work at all. The old Arduino-based system with the G-Shield, it wasn't having it. So I did call tech support. They were super friendly, super nice. They walked me right through what I needed to do to make it work temporarily until I did the thing. That was a little bit fiddly. It meant uninstalling some stuff, reinstalling specific versions of stuff, but they knew exactly what to do and they got me through it no problem. So customer service was great. Packaging was great. Installation instructions were a little dodgy. But that's kind of all of the preamble here, and let's actually jump into the real parts and talk about what I liked and what I didn't like, etc. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to go through the main upgrade kit, and the upgrade kit is the axis here, the Z Probe, the electronics, and the sideboard. This is not mounted right now because I thought I was already done with this video, and I hated this, so we'll talk about why I hated it. So I took it off. And this is backwards right now just because the drag chain orientation and whatnot. But we'll go through those things, then we'll go over the spindle and then the dust collection system here. So first and foremost, the X-axis. I love the X-axis. That was my biggest gripe really with the old machine, is that, especially out in the middle here, like once you got out into the center of the board, this thing was really, really weak, and now it is extremely solid. Now, it's not going to be a replacement for your big high-end professional solutions. I don't think it ever will be, and I don't think that's the market that Inventables is open, actually after, to tell you the truth. I think this is really always going to be meant for a prosumer area where people are kind of breaking into a market, trying to test to see if something's even going to sell, if it's worth having more machinery, or having official, tooling and stuff worked up, or having a part manufactured, or even for, doing rapid prototyping and whatnot. And I will say it is legit for rapid prototyping. Like these parts, I got these things down to well under the time it would even take me to 3D print these. And these are out of aluminum. And once I got the settings tuned in, I think the parts are good enough that they could go straight off to a customer after, a trip through the vibratory polisher. So I do think that is a good use case for these, and we'll talk about what you need to do to make it work that well. But first and foremost, I will say that this does still have some flex. So, like, little bit of pressure there, and it still has some flex. But the quality difference is pretty noticeable between what the machine could do before and after. So, I'll show you these. These were both, sorry, I'm moving over weird. These were both milled on the X-Carve. The first one was milled on the old configuration using the default settings. The right one was milled on the new configuration using the default settings. And you can tell, obviously, there's an obvious change in quality there. Now, admittedly, these were both sanded because the edge finish was pretty bad on both of them. So I did hit these with the spindle sander really quick before throwing these into the vibratory polisher, and you can see they're still not really that good. So again, that's with the default settings. And you can tell just where nothing has changed, no settings, the difference between the old machine and the new machine is pretty stark. Like, that's a pretty big difference. Now, I will say that neither one of these have the best tolerances. In fact, if you look at this little nut and you try and put it on one of these, you can see it doesn't even want to fit in all the way. You got to like really shove it in there. It will fit, but it's a really, really snug fit, and it's not supposed to be that snug. And you can tell the difference here between these. I don't know if that's going to show up on camera or not, but just so you can actually see, like, that fits a million times better. You can tell the gaps around the knob, they fit the way they're supposed to, whereas on using the default settings on the old one, not only is it hard to get in there, but you can tell like there's bigger gaps. Again, I don't know how well this will come across on camera, but you'll have to take my word for it. So I think most of that improvement in edge finish and most of the improvement in the actual sticking to the tolerances here is probably going to be due to the X-axis rigidity, to tell you the truth. Now, with the old machine, there was often a little bit of stepping. In fact, you can see it on this old wooden piece that I milled. And there's still a little teeny bit of that. It's not super, super bad, but it is there occasionally. I think that has a lot to do with the kind of milling operations you're doing, though, to tell you the truth. And some of the improvement I'm no expert in any of this, but it may be due to the electronics. I don't know enough about the electronics to say whether or not that's a must-have upgrade. But that's what we're going to talk about next. So for the actual X-axis upgrade, I highly recommend it. If you do no other upgrades, do that one. All right, so for the actual X controller, I like it. I like it a lot. I love this big red stop button. That saved me a few times now. I love these dedicated, actual, pause. It's pause, resume, and exit. Basically, is stop the whole operation. So that's really nice. I love having these. You do have these buttons in the software, but they don't respond nearly as quickly in my experience. And this alone, like a big hardware disconnect that just cuts power to the whole machine, is a huge lifesaver. Now, you can get this separately as an upgrade for the old gear, but, it is nice having it, and I really do recommend that if you don't get the X controller, which is fairly expensive, to tell you the truth. I think it's like I want to say like $330. I'll double check it and I'll annotate the screen here. Maybe it's only $230. Either way, it's a lot. It's probably the biggest portion of cost regarding the new machine. But if you're going to be making money off of your machine, it might be worthwhile having this big enclosure. I like the enclosure a lot better. I certainly like the dedicated buttons, and I also like that I have some upgrade options here. I don't know how well you can see any of this, but there's a lot of other options for various different things in here, for misters and various different like PWM signals for spindle control and things like that are all dedicated. They're completely unused, but it gives you some future upgrade ability, which is really nice. And as you can see, if you choose to wire it that way, you have separate drivers for the Y and Y2. So all of that's really nice. I can't say in all honesty that I can tell a huge difference between just the electronics, unless the electronics are playing a role in the better resolution. Speaking of resolution, there is some additional stuff you can do on the inside of this if you're kind of an advanced gamer to, I guess, you can do some like sub-stepping on the stepper motors and things like that. I think there's a different word for it, I forget what it's called. But that is nice. So I do recommend this, but only if you can justify the $330 cost, for any of that stuff. It works great. I love it. And since I have it, I'm certainly going to use it. But, I don't know that I would have dropped $330 just as a home hobbyist for this when the other one honestly worked pretty well. One other side note about the electronics, it comes with a proper length power cord. The other machine, for whatever ridiculous reason, came with a 2-foot power cable. In fact, it came with this 2-foot power cable. And why anything comes with a 2-foot power cable is beyond me. So I really do like this. Love the X-axis. hate the sideboard. Hate it with the fiery passion of 1,000 suns. In fact, that might be underselling it. And here, let me move this out of the way because I can. And the reason I can is because this is not attached. And the reason it's not attached is because I hate it. So this, in my opinion, is a solution in search of a problem. And I don't really blame Inventables for selling it, although it is like 80 bucks, which I don't think is worth it, especially not because it creates more problems than it solves, in my opinion. And the problem that it was meant to solve, I'm pretty sure, is a problem that, in my opinion, didn't need solving. So why this thing exists, I can almost guarantee, I have not confirmed this, but I can almost guarantee you that this exists because people kept knocking their electronics off the table. Now, the new electronics have holes here that you obviously could have just screwed down to your table or to a block of wood or attached on your own in a smaller, way if you wanted it attached to the machine. I actually prefer that it's a little satellite unit that I can pick up and move around because I don't leave my X-Carve here all the time. I move it, so it's nice having that. The attachment points on here are these little angle brackets, and they don't inspire confidence at all. Like, there's a ton of flex in it. I would never trust picking this thing up by this side, so ultimately it makes a huge machine even bigger. It does it in a not particularly secure way, and my biggest gripe with it, these holes. As you can see here, this thing is completely enclosed, right? There's no access to the underside, which means that when inevitably, and you will, drop your bits, your screws, your nuts, your bolts, your parts down these holes and they roll underneath here, they are gone forever. And the only way to get them off is basically, again, while the whole thing is attached to the machine, slide it off to the side or have somebody, lift it up while you dig around underneath there or something like that. It's just a nightmare. I don't know why these holes are here. Presumably they're for cabling, but there's not really any cables that would logically go there on the machine, so it's like they put them there just in case and ended up making a part that didn't need to exist anyway a liability. So I don't blame them for creating it. I don't think it was particularly well thought out with these holes, with the fully enclosed bottom, with these brackets right here. I don't know how else you would have done, or how else you would have bothered to attach it, but honestly, I don't think it needed to be attached to begin with. So don't buy this. As I said, this is included with the kit, and it probably makes up a pretty decent portion of the cost because this is an $80 part. So rather than buying the upgrade kit at face value, unless you just have to have this setup, I would buy this, and the Z Probe independently rather than this. This will never be attached to the machine again. But that's enough about that. Just don't buy that. You don't gotta worry about that. The next upgrade that comes with that kit, in fact the last one, is the Z Probe. So first and foremost, I will say that I never really found setting the Z height to be particularly difficult or time consuming, but this does work. It does save time. It is really nice. Now, there is something going on, and I don't know if it's the electronics, I don't know if it's the Z Probe, or I don't know if it's easel. So I can't point a finger at any one area. But as you can see from some of these old milling marks here, the old configuration of the X-Carve always milled into my table, just a little bit. Now it is a wasteboard, so it's not the end of the world. It's kind of meant to be somewhat, expendable, but for a fairly expensive part, I don't want to be treating it like a consumable any more than I have to. But as you can see, it always milled in a little bit. Ever since the upgrade, it mills in significantly. Now I've checked and double checked and triple checked all of the material thicknesses, and everything is set up right, but it always overmills down into the work surface. Now that could potentially be because the software is expecting this to be a different height than it really is. It could also be something to do with the electronics, I suppose, or it could be something to do with easel. I just don't know. But something is definitely going on there. It's certainly worth mentioning. Obviously this is, something that you can account for just by putting another waste, thin piece of MDF or something underneath it that'll act as a more expendable wasteboard. But I don't think you should have to do that, at least not to this extent. A little bit of marking here and there is nothing in the world, but that's pushing it. And then, of course, there's the issue with the Z Probe up here. This isn't an issue with the Z Probe at all, but rather with the instructions. Some of the older machines will not have the mounting hole here, so if you don't, don't bother installing one. And even if you have the hole there, if you're going to install the dust collection system, don't bother installing it there. Just use the relocation kit. So that covers the main installation kit. The main upgrade kit. So that's the X-axis, which I love. The electronics, which are really cool. I don't know that I would spend the money unless I really had a need to, but I do really like them and they work well. The Z Probe, which again I like. I don't know if it's responsible for this, but it does save some time and it's relatively cheap. I think it's under 30 bucks. Or right around there. So this will save you a little bit of time. Again, it wasn't super time consuming or difficult before, but I do use it now that I have it, so I like it. And then of course the sideboard, which I don't recommend anybody buy. So on to the next upgrade, the actual spindle here. So the spindle is just a DeWalt 611 trim router. The upgrade itself is actually just the housing right here, and the new machines come with all of this and the trim router, but this is all upgraded from the old 24-volt DC spindle. One nice thing about the old 24-volt system was that it was controlled via the main electronics here. The new system, you have to manually power it on with the switch, and then you have to manually adjust the speed. Now, while I have nothing at all wrong with the DeWalt 611 trim router, I love that router. I already had one of these. I use it all the time. It's wonderful for milling wood. For milling aluminum, honestly, even at the slowest speed, I found it doesn't really go slow enough. So for people who are used to milling wood, you can feel, when you need to change a setting. You can see, oh, this is burning a little bit. Ultimately, you're going to feel some resistance. You're going to see that you're getting tear out. Things like that. They're all you can feel it in the cut. You can't do that with the CNC, and the way that you might fix something for dealing with wood is not the way that you might fix it with dealing with the CNC. In fact, it seems super counterintuitive. More often than not, it's been my experience that if you're getting bad cuts, or you're breaking bits, or the work's getting super hot, etc., it's because you need to increase the travel speed and slow the bit down. And I know that seems weird, but I broke a lot of bits trying to just wing the settings, thinking like, oh, I'll just fiddle with them until I get it right. Even small variances in things would lead to broken bits almost instantly. And as you can see, we've got a fair number of bad cuts and failed attempts and whatnot that didn't get very far in at all. So I would recommend that if you do plan to mill aluminum, first off, if you're going to mill wood with this thing, it's perfectly fine. But let's face it, there are a lot of ways to mill wood. I really wanted to be able to mill aluminum, so that's why I'm focusing on that. If you're going to mill aluminum, you're never really going to take your spindle off of the slowest setting, at least for an 1/8 inch bit. I think you would actually have to slow it down further for a larger bit, at least at the chip loads and stuff that I was using. Now, let me say that I am absolutely no expert in milling. I'm about the farthest thing from it, hence all the broken bits. But after I broke a lot of bits, I did take some time to go read some articles, learn a little bit about chip load and how to calculate the appropriate travel speeds and spindle speeds for various different diameter bits and numbers of flutes and all that kind of stuff. And I really don't think this is ideal for milling aluminum, but it will work. And not only will it work, it'll work really well, provided you get within a very narrow band of bit, flutes, speed, travel, plunge depth, depth per pass, and etc. If you get everything tuned into a pretty narrow area there, it gets you pretty good results. You can mill out things relatively fast. This is less than a 20-minute cut. These on the old machine were 3.5 hours, I think. 3.5 hours to cut out using the old settings, and on the new settings using the default settings. After I learned a little bit about what to do and figured out what to change and got it tuned in a little bit, I could cut out one of these in 5 minutes. Now, at the 5-minute cut, I did feel like it was pushing it a little bit, so I ended up backing off the settings, and I'll put them all right here. The settings I ended up using would cut one of these out in 15 minutes, like 15 minutes even. So that is pretty good. Honestly, I think 15 minutes for a cut for a small business owner that might be churning out, relatively few parts, but still need to be able to keep up with demand. That would mean in an 8-hour day, you could, pump out 32, parts if you ran it, all 8 hours. And if you're doing, 32 of these a day, imagine you're selling them at, I don't know, 15 to, $15 or so, then, that's, I think that's a proof of market viability. And again, that's kind of the stance I'm taking here. So while I do love the router, if your main use is going to be for carving aluminum, you may want to look for a trim router that has a slower speed or an alternate method of controlling the speed. My other gripe is not with the machine itself, but rather with the software. Now the easel, all my cuts were done with easel. It's not the ideal software by any means, but it is the starter solution that I think most people are going to go to when they get their X-Carve. So that's what I did everything in. Now when you go through the wizard that sets up your machine, it's going to ask you what kind of spindle you're using. And it's going to know whether or not you're using the 24 volt, DC router, the old one, or the newer trim router here. And honestly, it does almost nothing with that information, it seems. At least for milling aluminum, it uses the exact same super horrible settings, which produce just garbage cut qualities on these parts. And I can't fathom why. Furthermore, you have to figure out the speed on your own. So even though it knows the material, it knows the bit, it knows the machine, it knows the configuration within reason, it gives you no indication of what you should set your spindle speed to. So that's just kind of on you to figure out. So I went through a fair number of these bits, just thinking, I should have it above the slowest possible speed, and it turned out that the slowest possible speed was about the only one that would work. So that's something that needs to be improved in the software. It's not a problem with the machine, and it wouldn't be a problem if you were using, a more appropriate cam, software. Now, one small other side note is this goes up a lot taller, so a lot of people have created various different incarnations of something like this. This is my own design, but there are lots of other ones out there that sits on top of this nut here, and then you can use that to wind up your Z axis. Again, that's not nearly as important now since I have the little Z probe, but that's what I used to use for setting the Z height. And it is still kind of nice to be able to just manually jog that up and down because there's not really any other way to do it. For all the other axes, you can, once it's powered down, you can freewheel it. With the Z, you really can't unless you want to sit here turning on these little gears. So you'll probably, if you have something like this, you will probably have to make a new one. I will be making a new one almost certainly. I just haven't done it yet, so something like that. And that's really all there is to say about it, honestly. It's a perfectly good upgrade. If you're milling wood, I don't think you're going to have any problem with it at all. I will talk really quick about the bit on here. This is the actual bit. It's sold. I can get it to focus. This is sold by Inventables. It's an Onsrud bit, if I'm saying that right. And I think it's like $22, which seems a little bit pricey, but I did buy some cheapo bits from some Amazon dealer. I think there's some China-made bits that were similar in feature, but not nearly the quality. They all broke almost immediately when I tried to use them. Now, one thing that I really like about this, and you can kind of tell here, angle this down, is that the flutes here are really short. You don't obviously want your chuck clamping down on the flutes themselves, so the flutes on this are only about a ½ inch, which is really nice because it means that you can choke this thing way up inside of the chuck, and not having this bit hanging down super far will increase the stiffness of this without allowing it to flex at all, which will help with a lot of the chatter and also help with that flex causing this brittle carbide to shatter. So onto the dust collection kit. Again, this is a separate upgrade apart from the main upgrade, just like the spindle was. I like this a lot. You get everything that you need with the exception of a shop vac. And to compound things, rather than using my really powerful shop vac, I decided to see what would happen if I used my super cheapo bucket vac Cyclone that I made in a different video. And it worked great. It worked wonderfully. My only gripe at all with this machine is the head design. So this works really well, provided you're back here. If you're milling around in this area, you're good to go. But if you're anywhere within the first 10 centimeters, then this is going to be progressively off the board, which means that if you're milling like right at your home position, this isn't doing anything at all. My homebrew solution, and I don't have it anymore, it's something I went over in the other review, but the video was lost. So there's this kind of waste area over here and over here. My old home solution went to the side, so when it went all the way over, to this homing spot here, it didn't get in the way. Now the airflow on mine didn't work nearly as well, and I had a little leather skirt. In fact, I do still have the leather skirt, which worked pretty well, honestly. Not as well as this. Sometimes the stiffness on this can be a little bit of an issue, getting over clamps and stuff like that, so you have to get it set just right. That's when those play and pause buttons on the electronics come in really handy, because you can just pause it really quick, come in here, adjust these, set them however you want it. So we're trying to do this one-handed. And this is all magnetized, so it just slips right in there, stays perfectly in line. And again, you can adjust the height. There's a little scale here on both sides. By undoing these, you can raise it and lower it. So the little pause buttons and stuff on here make it really nice when you need to go in and fiddle with these just a little bit, get that height just right. So as I was saying, if you're milling in this first 10 centimeter area, your hose is going to be off the board more often than not. So that's my biggest gripe with this. I think this hose here could have been angled backward, so that it faced in towards the bit to help mitigate that a little bit. Also, if you're cutting something really thick, you're going to run into that same issue, where you're going to be milling here and your hose is going to be completely off the work, and it's not going to be getting a good suction at all. Now, some of that would have been mitigated, admittedly, if I used a more powerful dust collector. But again, I wanted to give it a run for its money. So when I milled parts like this, and I milled them all back here, which again isn't a big issue for me. I have the bigger machine, but if you have the smaller machine, burning the first 10 centimeters of your board may not be real high on your to-do list. So when I milled these, there was like practically nothing at all, even with my weak vacuum, left on the table. When I milled this, there was aluminum everywhere. It was just, terrible. When I made some of these initial cuts, in this, I had it at the front of the board. I had it at the front of the board here. Again, it left aluminum everywhere. So just be forewarned that if you're milling something, you're going to want to move it back a little bit. Again, not the end of the world if you have the space for it, but if you don't, it's definitely something worth mentioning. That's really all there is to say about the system. The dust, swing arm works fantastic. This hose is, nothing to write home about, but it gets the job done. It's got a nice little grounding strap. Everything is included. Really, all you need to do is supply your own dust vac. And this is what I used, my little bucket head cyclone, bucket head cyclone system I made a long time ago. And it worked great. You can see it's been slowly sandblasting the drum here. But you can see inside there, it's all aluminum. So I got really nothing bad to say about this, apart from I think I would have and probably will redesign that head eventually. So on to the question of the day. Can you mill aluminum? What's it like? What do you need to do? Etc., etc., etc. I went through a lot of different iterations. This isn't even all of them. And apart from the fact that you cannot trust the default settings that are going to come out of easel, they're going to give you garbage quality cuts. When I used those settings, it was doing so much rubbing that after the cuts, the material was so hot I couldn't even touch it. And that was even with lube. Consequently, I don't recommend you use lube for milling aluminum. Near as I can tell, all it does is stick all of the shavings and stuff down into the grooves that you're cutting. And ultimately, they just end up getting continually remilled in there, which wrecks the surface finish. So you want your dust collection system moving air past the bit, cooling things down and sucking up all of those dry chips because they're taking heat with them. So I really don't recommend that you use rubbing alcohol, oil, anything like that for milling. I'm sure somebody out there who knows way more about this is going to tell me why I'm wrong, and they're probably right. Listen to them. But in my experience, it made zero appreciable difference in the quality of the cut or the heat of the material or the wear on the bit. Almost all of the stuff you see here, in fact some more than this even, was cut on one bit. I did break one of the bits right here. You can see that little mess up right there. That was my own fault though. That was not the machine. This is one of the nice bits. And basically what happened there is I tried making the tabs really, really thin to aid in cleaning up afterwards. And I made it a little bit too thin, and that may be partially due to the over milling issue. But I made them too thin and it busted loose. got the bit caught and it broke. So that one was my fault. But other than that, once I upgraded to the good bit, and this is a 2-flute flat bottom bit. I already showed you the bit itself, and of course there will be links to this in the description, as well as all of these individual parts will be in the description as well. And I'm going to put the settings up here again. I think I already showed them earlier, but I'll put them on here again just so you can get in the last look, and I'll put them in Imperial and metric, just so everybody doesn't want to yell at me. And let's talk about the actual milling process. So kind of what I went through here originally was I set up the machine the old way, and I milled this guy, and it worked. It worked fine, actually. I didn't really have any trouble with it. I was surprised, that it did work. And as you can see, it doesn't actually fit all that well. Now, these were all using the exact same shapefile, so if this one doesn't fit, and this one doesn't fit using, again, the same settings but with the better equipment, then I think the difference really is in the settings. The reason this one fits beautifully and these ones don't is because the default settings in easel just aren't good. And I don't understand entirely why they're not good. I will say that if you just try to look up a speeds and feeds chart, you're going to get settings that I think are way out of the range of this machine. And that's probably due to the rigidity. Maybe in some part just the amount of torque and the forces and stuff applied by these stepper motors as well, but also I think just the rigidity and the vibration and the potential for chatter and things like that. The settings that you see on screen are the ones that I found worked really well for me. And with those, like I said, I went down from 3.5 hours for not particularly good quality to, I believe both of these were cut in 5 minutes and significantly better quality. Now, I will say this faceting that you see on here, that's actually the shape file. That's the machine doing what it's supposed to do. It's just the shape file. These curves were not particularly curvy. They had a lot of steps in them. So after I cut these at 5 minutes, I did back the settings off just a little bit, and then things seemed to smooth out just a little bit more. It didn't feel, the machine didn't feel like it was straining so hard, I guess for lack of a better term, and things started going a lot smoother. In fact, when I cut these, now these gaps are wider, and these cuts did take longer than 15 minutes because I actually changed the path because I was trying to trick the machine into doing something, which I'll talk about in a moment. But these all came out much better, as well as these ones. And I think those are the settings I'm ultimately going to keep, which are the ones I showed on screen. Now, one thing I did notice quite by accident is when I milled this, I actually milled 2 of these, and when I milled the first one, I just forgot to flip nothing went wrong, I just forgot to flip the logo because I want to use this for a branding iron. And even though my logo is symmetrical this way, if you mirror it, it's not. So I ended up having to mill another one, and I tried to make a rubber stamp consequently out of the other one. Thanks for that idea, Wes. Well, not a silicone stamp, but I didn't use enough mold release, and it got stuck in there, so I just threw it away. But when I did this, these are all pocketing operations, right? I'm not trying to cut anything out. I'm trying to clear area. I'm trying to clear material, right? This, using the exact same settings, cut like butter, like super smooth. It was quiet. No heat, no nothing. The little bottom finish on there, like you can see it, but you can't hardly feel it at all. Like maybe if you rub your nail on it. And you see that even on high-end parts for the most part. So like I couldn't be happier with this. And I started thinking about it. It's the fact that these were pocketing operations. So when you're pocketing, it's going to make a small, light pass, that first pass. And then ultimately it's going to be running around in a circle or around a profile of something, clearing out an area, which means it's going to be more like traditional routing. So if you're routing wood, you're routing on the edge of a surface like this, right? And you're really only cutting on the one edge, which is great. When you're plunging through material, you're cutting basically on that entire front surface. More than that, you've got more rubbing. On the material, you have more problems with the actual, waste ejection, whether it be sawdust or chips or what have you. And even with the upcut bits, plunging through like that, it's not going to be as good, right? As soon as I switched to pocketing, suddenly everything started cutting like butter. So then I started trying to trick the machine into pocketing. So for this one, and mind you, at this point of the game, I was confident enough in the machine that I set this stuff to cut and I left the house. I wasn't even here for these. I just came back when they were finished. But the reason that these channels are so much wider is I was hoping that the easel software would cut the outer one and then do a really light pass on the inner one, because it's only just a little bit extra wide. But you can't adjust the cut order in easel, so at least I didn't find a way to do it. So it ultimately didn't work when I actually went and reviewed the cut order, because some of these did get a little bit fuzzy. Actually, they'll look really good right now. There was a couple of spots on one of these that I thought, you know, I might sand down, but for the most part, these all came out really nice. And but again, you couldn't really do that there, so then I went and I milled one. I just changed the shape. I redid the shapefile manually. I added my own tabs, made these extra wide sections. I just had it cut out this entire center section altogether, and this was hands down the best quality one. Now the faceting on this one, I think, is because of the bit. It's not a problem. Like, I think it looks good. But if I adjusted the speeds and stuff a little bit, I bet I could have that smooth out just a little bit. But this is hands down the best edge quality, and I would say the best actual fit. So the difference between this one and those is that this is actually just a shape that I pocketed out with fake tabs that I manually created. So I basically tricked it into doing all pocketing operations instead of contour operations. That's kind of the long and the short of it. And that definitely worked. So I will say that while it will work, you absolutely can do, you know, contour operations on here, which is what most of these were. All of these, the two better ones here, etc. If you can have your machine do pocketing, you will see a noticeable improvement in quality, and again, it's a night and day difference in sound and finish and everything. You're gonna go from like, oh man, that's kind of loud, and is that good, you know, to like not even being able to hear it, you know, basically cutting anymore. Like, you won't be able to hear it over the sound of your vacuum. So that's really the advice here I have for you. Ignore the easel settings for aluminum; they're terrible. Get yourself a good quality bit. Again, you know, the details for this bit will be down in the description. If you can do pocketing operations, or rather pocketing operations or pocketing operations, those seem to cut way, way better than the contouring. And that's really it. You know, learn a little bit about milling is what it comes down to. I think most of the people who are going to argue with this machine and go like, oh, it's a toy, it can never cut material, you know, are going to come from one of two places. Either they know so much about milling that they already have better gear and they're already experienced with better gear, and these are legitimately worse, you know, examples than they're used to. Or there are people who got this machine, tried to cut aluminum without learning anything about milling aluminum, and then had a lot of failures and went like, oh, the machine's garbage. So I'm here to tell you, you can with a little bit of practice. I basically had no failures after, you know, I tuned up the settings. You can cut aluminum just fine, and I would encourage you to do so. If you have a reason to do this and you're gonna, you know, maybe, you know, try and make a little bit of money off the machine, I think you can. I think it's a legit purchase, and I think you can probably do, you know, some pretty good work with this until you decide whether or not it's worth it to get, you know, a high-end machine or farm out the, you know, manufacturing. So that's it. I hope you like this review. I don't normally do reviews. I don't really plan to do a lot of reviews, but I wanted to make sure this was really thorough and talk through all of the stuff from a realistic standpoint. So if you like this, please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'll talk to you later, YouTube.